Good morning. Uh, as you can tell, I'm still not feeling that great, but you get to see my teaching assistant, Juniper. She is a 3-year-old Australian Shepherd. And when I go out, I'm just the person with the dog, right, Juniper? Anyway, she takes care of me when I'm unwell. But we'll we're back at it. We'll be back to normal next week. And turn the corner, I'm better. Gosh, this COVID thing really sucks. I mean, I was out of it for a couple of days there, but getting better. We'll be fine next week. Anyway, back to class. Um, Everything's still on schedule. The assignment for the three sources is still due Friday. The good news is this is going to be a not great in-depth week anyway. I've been a little ahead. We've covered a lot of the things uh, I would have done. I already have. We've already covered the various schools. But okay, review of the topics. Topics for your papers were pretty good. The biggest single issue was they were vague. Big thing, way overgeneralized. We talked about media violence. What kind? Movies, TV, games. Most were, yeah. When you talk about the media is pretty broad. It talks about TVs, movies. When they mean the media, you usually mean established legacy broadcast news outlets. Now, that's a mouthful. So think about specific media like social media and its effect on whatever you're looking at, like violence. Three good sources due by tomorrow. You should still be able to do it. And the final essay due Friday, September 15th. A lot of people have already done that. The schools, I was going to go a little bit more in depth of. I have some videos. You can look at it. But the real thing, and it's right out of the book we're going to look at this week anyway, are resources and sources. And that's this week's assignment anyway. Uh, there are really, okay, obviously, two kinds of sources we usually look at: primary sources, people who were there. Kind of the point of this first assignment is you're the primary source. You've seen something, you've experienced something, and then contrast it with your media experience. And then a secondary source, something that puts it in context. If, okay, you've you've been affected by cyberbullying. You could write about your experience, but a secondary source will tell you whether or not that's gotten worse and what the effects are. That's what you get from a secondary source. Uh, yeah, and when you look at a source that you're looking at, look at the bibliography at the end. That'll give you a lot better things to look at. Here are UTC library, very lovely people. Don't be afraid to visit. They're really cool. And we have a really good local library here in Chattanooga. And they have a lot of good stuff too. Here's we're part of the UTK system. Here's the main library up in Knoxville. And you can access any of these things. On the internet material, I was going to do more demonstrations in class. Searches are good, but Google and others don't count the most. They don't, count the best. They can't really say what's best and what's not. They give you what's the most popular. let's take a look at Google.com. Versus at Chattanooga, see what they have to say. First thing is, okay, main source. Nice thing to look at. Programs. Nothing really stands out. Which is, okay, virtual tour. You see, our people take a good effort. Hotels, MapQuest, our people take a good look at SEO. Search engine optimization. You put in one keyword on big enough and often enough, you will come in at the top of a Google search. So if you wanted to say bad things about somebody, you just go and you just put, you just do a search again and again and again and say bad things about it, and that person will come up, or good things. We're really good at that at UTC. When I did the search, it's all good information, and that's not an accident. That's because we make the effort of making sure that our best information comes up first. Okay, so, but the bad news is on a Google search, it's a good start, but be aware it's not often your best, but the most popular that comes up. Wikipedia, anybody can edit it. Again, not a bad starting point, but it's not authoritative. A lot of historical material isn't digital. People wrote things down. We haven't scanned and digitized everything. Access to much material is subject to fees and copyright, and you can't get it without permission. We'll talk about that next week. Other good stuff to look at: bibliographies, catalogs, digital archives. See, that's mostly, I was going to go into more depth and detail on the various schools today or Tuesday, but that basically covers what I was going to do anyway. And on Thursdays, here we go. Today, see, we're up to speed already. From Sloan and Stam. Well, it should have been for Thursday, October 30th. Anyway. Big essay due September 15th. Remember to cite or quote sources in the text. Just don't list them at the end. An according to or three goes a long way. Cite, say an according to when something's an opinion, or where there is unusual fact or information, or when you actually quote somebody. You don't have to cite common knowledge or your own analysis. Oh, big one, write in paragraphs. Some people don't. It's just all, 1,000 words, 3 pages, 1 paragraph. No one's able to read all of that. Break, different topics of an essay, 3 or 4 sentences. That's all you need for a paragraph. Often remember, W's and an H. In a history essay, who is also a group. Not just me or you or someone you see on the internet, but different groups of people, liberals and conservatives, African Americans and Caucasians and Asians. LGBT people, different groups look at history different ways. Always look at critics and alternative sources. If you answer your critics, your answers are going to be stronger. Okay, what does it? Big one. Should this be broken down into more than one topic? A lot of people write about social media and its effects on society. Well, there's lots of effects. There's misinformation, there's addiction, there's distracted driving and phones. All of these different things are different topics. Break yours down into one topic. Topic should stand on its own location, but yes, conditions, geography, climate, and weather. Certainly that affects, geography affects certainly where we are. We're at a historical crossroads because this is where the Tennessee River bends and comes out of the mountains into the open. This is why Chattanooga was such a strategic area for the Trail of Tears and in the Civil War, because once you get Chattanooga, it's a straight shot to Atlanta and Savannah and the interior South. So geography is a big difference. It's a history class, but when also tells you technology at the time, politics, and other contexts. Sources and notes to do. Let's see.
Grammarly Business features the same premium writing suggestions millions of individuals know and love.
Hey, what's up, guys? So I just got my hands on some new books and I am itching to read these things. But before I do, we do need to talk about the opposite side of the reading coin, which is writing, specifically the writing of essays. Now, the status of the essay as a cruel and unusual punishment was hotly debated at the formation of the Geneva Convention back in 1949. But if you bring this fact up to your teacher, they're just going to tell you not to believe everything you hear on the internet. And you're still going to have to do your essay, which is unfortunate because among all the types of assignments out there, essays rank among the most time consuming. And you can take this from somebody who basically writes essays for a living. I mean, I know I'm a YouTuber, but every script that I create is essentially an essay before I communicate it in front of this camera. And even though I've been writing these for a really long time, they're still super time consuming. So what I want to do today is give you some practical tips for speeding up the essay writing process. Now, I do have to throw a qualifier on there because if I don't, then it really boils down to two main tips. Number one, type the same word over and over and over again until you hit the page requirement. Or number two, massive plagiarism, both of which are probably not things you want to be doing. So let's throw that qualifier on there. Let's speed up the essay writing process without sacrificing quality, while still ending up with something that is worth reading and that communicates a well-structured idea. Now, typically the formation of well-structured ideas starts in the research stage. So let's start there. When you're writing a research paper, the process of finding sources to back up your arguments can actually be one of the most time-consuming parts of the project. And that's because no matter how many sources you have, it's really easy to convince yourself that your paper would be truly great if you just got one more source. And then once you have that, you want another one, and then another one. Cal Newport calls this research recursion syndrome. You get stuck in this endless loop of just finding source after source, and it becomes really easy to go down rabbit holes that you think are going to yield really insightful information, but end up being completely irrelevant to your paper. Now, luckily, Newport doesn't just stop at giving the dragon a name, but he also gives you the tools you need to slay it. His book, How to Become a Straight A Student, outlines a series of steps with some general rules for avoiding this problem while still getting the information you need. To follow this process, first, you venture into the stacks of the library or the internet and you find your sources. Once you found them, you make personal copies of them and annotate those copies. Finally, you decide if you're done, and if you're not, you loop back to step number one. Let's go ahead and call this the efficient research algorithm, since it's a logical set of steps that are easy to understand and carry out in order. But without fleshing out this algorithm, it's hard to know exactly what you're supposed to be doing on each step. So here are a few details that'll make it a bit more useful. First, when you're looking for your sources, start with general sources, things like broad histories, overviews of the topic, popular science books. these kind of books are easy to find and they kind of gloss over everything within your topic. Now, that does make them not.
Yeah, this is good. It does. People have asked me, do you need all scholarly resources? No. Good resources can be good books.
Not quite as good as specific sources for finding arguments that you can use in your paper, but they do have bibliographies and they do point to other works. Now, with specific sources, like we said, they are more powerful. They're going to contribute more, but number one, they're difficult to find if you don't know where to look. And two, because they are so detailed, it's really easy to go down rabbit holes that don't end up being fruitful. So if you start with a general source and use that to drill down to find specific sources, you're going to be really efficient in your research process. Now, before we move on, I do want to say that research in itself is a huge topic. So if you do want to learn how to do it more efficiently and get some more tips, we did just publish an article all about library research over on College Info Geek, and I'll have that linked in the description down below. Moving on to that second step of the algorithm, I find that the easiest way to make copies of sources that I want to reference later on is to just take pictures of them with my phone. And I do this all the time when I'm researching for video scripts. Now, I'm the kind of person who likes to own my books, but I also like to write at coffee shops, and I can only fit so many books in my backpack. So when I know I have a quote that I want to reference or something that I want to go back to, I'll take a picture of it with my phone. That way I have a good reference of all the different sources that I'm going to use. Lastly, when it comes to that question of are you done or should you repeat the algorithm, you can follow Newport's rule of thumb. First, list out all the arguments that you want to make in your paper and then figure out which ones are crucial and which ones are merely helpful. For the arguments that are crucial, aim to have at least 2 good sources to back them up. And for the ones that are merely helpful, 1 will probably do the trick. Now, when you're looking over your list of crucial and helpful arguments, keep this mantra in mind: quality over quantity.
Yes.
This applies to the number of sources you choose to use, but it also applies to the number of arguments that you choose to flesh out in your paper. Because unless there's some arbitrary requirement in the assignment, a smaller number of well-structured, well-thought-out arguments always beats out a larger number of mediocre ones. And that might sound obvious on the surface, but it's important to note that the inclusion of a mediocre argument can actually detract from the entire paper, even if the other arguments are good. Now, this idea of quality over quantity doesn't just apply to the number of arguments and sources you're using, because you should also scrutinize the actual words and letters that you're using. What I mean by this is that when people know they're writing an essay that's going to be evaluated, a lot of them experience temptation to utilize a cornucopia of abstruse, esoteric terminology, contrapositive to the vernacular. In other words, people use big, fancy words because they think it's going to make them sound smarter. But this usually has the opposite effect. In fact, a Princeton University psychology professor did a study about 10 years ago that showed that perceptions of intelligence actually go down when people use needlessly complicated vocabulary. But when you think about it, this is really common sense, and you don't have to go read a bunch of charts and graphs to understand the point of an essay is to communicate your ideas clearly. As Karl Popper put it, if you can't say it simply and clearly, keep quiet and keep working on it until you can. And honestly, going into an essay without feeling like you have to dig into the deep end of your vocabulary will make the writing process a lot faster because you're going to be writing in the way that you naturally think and speak.
Bingo. Too many people go on and on. Too many, well, I'm going to write about this topic. Yes, we know because you're writing about it. In regard to this topic, yes, we know you're regarding the topic. I mean, too many people put in too many words.
Now, while the temptation to use complicated vocabulary can definitely slow down the writing process, it is but a tiny speed bump compared to the brick wall in the middle of the road that is perfectionism. Every time you find yourself staring at a blank page or a blinking cursor and just can't think of what to write, perfectionism is likely to be the main culprit. But luckily, there are some things you can do to get over it. First and foremost, I recommend that you write your body paragraphs first and save the intro and conclusion for last. See, your intro is where you're going to, introduce the topic.
This is one I disagree with. Start with what you're going to say, then say it, and then wrap it up. Don't start in the middle. He's really good to this point. Not so sure.
Or the argument that you're writing about. But going into the intro before fleshing out the body paragraphs is like trying to give a tour of a building that you've never even been in. You need to have a clear understanding of each point that you're talking about before you introduce them. And the same thing applies to your conclusion. Plus, choosing to go in this order also makes it easier to get into the flow state of writing because you know you're making a mess. You know you're going to have to go back and edit things later. But when you start from a blank page and you think you have to write the intro first, it's really easy to succumb to the temptation that you can do it all in one go. And on that note, it can also be really helpful to separate the drafting stage and the editing stage as much as you possibly can. And there are lots of ways to do this. You can block off different chunks of time on different days for each stage of the process. You can have different locations, and you can even work within different apps for the drafting and the editing. And this is something that I love doing for video scripts. I'll often do my research and my drafting over in Evernote, and then once that's done, I'll move it over to Google Docs for editing and final prep. And I actually do something similar with video recording as well. When I want to get some stuff out of my head, I'll often pull my phone out and record something really casually that I know I'm not going to use in the final cut. And doing this takes a lot of pressure off. When I'm filming here, there is a ton of pressure because I know I'm probably going to use it. Now, this last tip is pretty nuts and bolts, but use a citation generator. There are a ton of these out there. Almost all of them are completely free, and they really speed up the process of creating bibliography or a works cited. I remember having to do this by hand back when I was a student, and every time I would do it, I would have to constantly refer back to the style guide.
Yeah, that you can just plug it in and it'll spit it out. Now, with AI, I've tried it a few times, and it always leaves out something. Now, we're in the real world. Go ahead and try to generate something that way. I'm not upset if you do, but it's not going to be everything you need, at least not in this class. Anyway. Okay, someone asked about styles. Should I use APA or MLA? I don't care as long as you do it consistently. I want you to focus on content rather than style. Make an outline. Once you organize your information, takes a few minutes, say what you're going to start with, make a point. Each point should refer back to your original topic, which is why I say you start with the lead first, and then get to it. Primary sources and secondary, we talked about. Okay, organizational ideas, another video.
Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. Giddy up for the learning, guys. I'm Hip Hughes, and this is No Chunky. And today we're going to give you a little bit of the advice about thematic essays. And of course, this is going to cross over to really any type of history essay that you're writing. So pay attention as I grab my umbrella, so hammer and nails, and we go for a little bit of an adventure. Hammers and umbrellas. We're going to get to this in a second, guys. I really want to kind of introduce first the model that we're going to be using. It's out of New York State. It's United States History and Government Regents Thematic Essay on the Supreme Court. And we'll take a look at that in a second. But if you're doing a different type of essay, if you're doing a DBQ, a document-based question essay, there's actually a separate video for that. You can click that magic button up there and go watch that if you would like. But really, the advice that I'm going to give you is going to hold true really in the main concepts for a DBQ or a research paper or a free response essay if you're like in an AP US history course. It really is kind of the universal truth about writing. But here it is. Get to it, Hip Hughes. And we have the theme that United States Supreme Court decisions play an important role in United States history. And then it has three specific, what I'm going to call nails. Sometimes they're called bullets or dots or directions. And number one is to discuss the historical circumstances.
This is good. This works for this essay. This, okay. How does your experience different or align with the media coverage? And then 2 or 3 ways why your experience is different. Boom, boom, boom. Lead 3 paragraphs. There you go.
Circumstances that surround that case. Number 2 is going to be explain the court decision. And then number 3 is going to be the impact. And what I would say is that if you don't have specific tasks, You can apply this basic structure to pretty much any essay. You're going to really talk about the circumstances, the context of history, what was going on that we need to understand about whatever you're talking about. Then you need to explain it. You need to define it. You need to tell us that you know something about it. And then we always end with a crescendo of the impact. Why is it important? Why did we study it? What the heck is going on? What is it? Why is it important? So if you don't have this type of thematic essay structure, you can certainly use that. So I think it's raining. I'm going to grab an umbrella and tell you how to get started. Here we go. Right, an opening paragraph should at least be, I would say, 4 sentences on the short end. It might be up to 6 or 7 sentences, but every opening paragraph has the same structure. The same structure. Number 1, you have to talk about the theme. And if they give you the theme, then you just have to restate the theme. This one is that, United States Supreme Court decisions are important. The word throughout you can use to start any essay. Throughout. Memorize that stupid word. Throughout United States history, the Supreme Court has ruled on court cases that have led to decisions that have been important in our history. Giddy up for that. Don't spend more than 30 seconds on that, guys. And then really what we need to do is we need to open up this umbrella. I'm going to tell you what this umbrella is here in a second. I don't know why. That was danger. Danger in you. We're going to put the umbrella away. So much for the prop. But the umbrella represents the thesis. You've heard that word before, the thesis. Or maybe if there's more than one, the theses. The theses. And this is really what the whole essay is hinging on. This is the big idea. This is what's bigger than the content. This is what's the lesson, the moral, the fabric of the whole essay. And if you don't have that, then you're writing a report. Oh, no. I want to read an essay that has some kind of big idea. So if you watch the end of this video, what we'll do is we'll link it up to another video that I'm going to create that's going to give you 5 theses, 5 general historic big ideas that you should be able to put in your back pocket and slay any mighty essay with. How cool is that? But you do need a big idea. And I'm just going to give it up for this essay. The big idea really is that during times of crisis, when the doo-doo hits the fan, generally some group is going to lose their rights. It's kind of a freedom order concept. In order to get order, we have to take freedom away from somebody. So the 2 examples that we're going to use for this specific essay are going to be Schenck versus United States, 1919, and Korematsu versus United States, which is like 1844. Both of these court cases resulted in someone losing their rights. So now that I have that big idea, I'm going to put that big idea in there. And I can be very direct with this. I can say something to the effect of, one important idea that this essay will illustrate is, during times of crisis, civil rights are limited when the poo-poo hits the fan. All right, so get that sentence in there. And again, at the end of the video, we'll link this up to 5 big ideas. And then you need to take out your hammer. I have nails over there, but I'm not going to grab them because you get the idea. Because basically what we're going to do, I'm going to grab the nails. One second. With the nails, you look at the nails right there. The nails represent the specific bullets and objectives that the task has given
Yeah, you get the idea.
In this instance, there's
Get to the end here, and we'll get his theses that I like.
And of course, the more content that you have, the more evidence that you have, the longer it's going to be and the higher your grade's going to be. But if you suck at this, you should at least be able to kind of doggy paddle your way to a passing grade. All right, why don't I do what I promised you to? I'm going to freeze right here. That's my ugly face. And you'll go up and I'll give you 5 theses. I gotta Google if that's a word. Well, how about that? Put that in your back pocket. All right, guys, giddy up to learning, guys. We hope that you got the major idea of how you should approach a thematic essay, or really any essay when you're writing about history. If you haven't subscribed to Hip Hughes History, IDK WTH. Click the dumb red button right there. It's like good, do it, such. Yeah, how about that? Didn't that feel good? Great, how about that? And I'll let you know what I let you know at the end of every video. Where attention goes, energy flows. Guys, we'll see you next time that you press the button.
Oh, whatever. That was a tease that he wanted you to get to something else. That anyway.
You see this black box?
But you get the point. Start off with a big essay and hammer those little nails to back up what you're trying to say. Once you have some idea what you're dealing with, sum it up in a sentence to keep referring back to it in order to build your case. Watch for your research question. Here's an example. Author Jared Diamond says we speak English because of guns, germs, and steel. Western European culture became dominant worldwide because germs wiped out Native Americans and plagues forced Europe to reinvent itself and adapt. And while the Chinese invented gunpowder, the Europeans started to really use firearms in the 1300s, and steel gave the Europeans railroads and ships. Dependent variable, rise of culture, independent variable, guns, germs, and steels. Avoid cause and effect. You can only show relationships. You can't say guns, germs, and steels were the only reason we're speaking English, but it was an effect. Sweeping, yeah, avoid making sweeping generalizations. Sample organization, summary, lit review, background, method, say what you're doing, discussion, say why it happened, and conclusion. And here's examples, history essays, all about how to do this stuff. Okay. Now I want you to start thinking about what you're doing. You had your topics last week, a lot of them a little broad, get them a little bit more focused, get some sources to back them up, and you're good to go. And so am I. We will be with you in person next Tuesday. Thank you.